This is basically just a book chapter. The book overall was about cyberbullying. And so this chapter touched on how you might reduce workplace cyberbullying and bullying generally through empathy, compassion, and self-compassion training. So the author really just kind of touches on the definitions of empathy, compassion, and self-compassion, what the benefits of each of those are, what kind of interventions exist. So some worth mentioning are for empathy, like there's art therapy programs and music therapy. They've done workshops, over the course of a couple months where they do like a weekly meeting. Same with compassion, you might do meditations, self-compassion, there's cognitive based, therapies and mindfulness and things like that. So there's a whole range of what interventions could be. So they kind of break those down and give some examples. They talk about the ways that organizations can put these into play and how they can kind of integrate that into their management. And for leadership. And then they do a case study as well, where they gave us a solid example of what workplace cyberbullying could be, and what for that situation, what kind of interventions would be helpful and how that might reduce the bullying and cyberbullying. So it was really helpful. It was a really good overview. Now, if you want to go to the next slide. So basically the results are compassion and empathy and self-compassion all have a role to play here. They can, in reducing cyberbullying in the workplace. Compassion and empathy, of course, will help people to empathize with someone else, to understand where their feelings may be. And that can help you, one, not bully somebody else because you have empathy or compassion for them, but it might also help somebody in the workplace that sees that kind of behavior stop it because they understand and they see what's happening. Self-compassion can help reduce bullying and cyberbullying, because for those who bully out of insecurities or something along those lines, this gives themselves an ability to look at themselves and understand where they may be suffering or what they may be dealing with, so that they're less likely to put that on others. And it's also a coping mechanism for those who are victims of bullying, to kind of withstand that and then find the best ways to address it that may not end up in leaving the company. So they talk about then how to put those in organizations, which really comes down to organizations needing to determine their own situations and how these things could help, and whether you need to do this because there are issues in the workplace, or do you want to find a way to train your leadership or integrate things into your policies that would help prevent these behaviors from happening, or reduce them. So really having an organization that's dedicated to reducing these things and is adamant about not having tolerance for bullying behaviors, and then looking at these kinds of areas and having experts, who can help lead the organization and leadership to care about these things and embrace, empathy and compassion and self-compassion for their employees and their well-being, will lead to a better company and a better workplace environment for them and their employees.
Boy, this is so rampant, especially in small companies where there's just like the owner or just the one guy that's kind of at the top, or a girl that's at the top, and they're just like, they have no consequences for their behavior, and so they can just kind of run rampant and sort of bully a lot of people. I wonder, I mean, it seems like it'd be a good idea to have, if there is some accountability, like if they're in a larger company and there's accountability for them in their behavior, if there's a way to like really clearly identify what kinds of behaviors are bullying, so someone knows.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important for leadership to take it seriously, because especially in the example of cyberbullying, I mean, they were talking about how that could just be gossip over email, right? That impacts somebody. It could actually be on social media, though, outside of a workplace, so what are your repercussions if you find things like that happening?
That's bad. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack with that, I think, and what's effective, but I think having an organization that doesn't, that has strong policies about what the expectations are for behavior is really important. You know, not putting it on the victim to say, well, you know, just suck it up, but
right.
I think it's great that the result of this is focusing on compassion and empathy, and these are things that we talk a lot about in our work, and because we see the positive light that comes from organizations that practice this type of culture, like are compassionate and have empathy for others, it leads to more constructive results from conflict, right, and more opportunities. But to especially when talking about bullying, like or the gossip culture that we see a lot of, you know, highlighting compassion and empathy is important. I think it's a whole nother ballgame when we talk about trying to train someone. I feel like we talked about this last week too, about, okay, well, doing like a training on compassion. As for some, it would be very well received and in like easy almost to talk about these things and train on. But I think that the general population that kind of has like a guard up to, I don't need the training on empathy or compassion or like those, like that's kind of not in my general language. Like I don't use those terms. So those are typically, that's the general population of people that are doing the bullying that need that. So how do we break down that barrier, right? How do we get to that population?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I do like this approach of compassion and empathy. I mean, I think someone who is sort of a bully and it's very clear that they're exhibiting bully behavior, like they have probably some insecurity that needs to get worked out, and that probably needs to be worked out through some sort of counseling or therapy of some sort, because they don't have a lot of self-compassion usually, and they don't have a lot of, they don't let themselves make mistakes, you know, so then they project that out to other people. They usually have an inner bully happening in their own minds towards themselves, you know, and then they project it outward.